Welcome back to yet another episode of your Re-Educated podcast. Today, I am so excited to continue our season 10 conversations with Gautam Kaul. He is a respected scholar of finance, recognized for his pioneering contributions to financial theory, investment behavior, and educational innovation. A professor at the Ross School of Business at University of Michigan, he combines a rigorous analytical background with the passion for ethical and impactful business education. His career spans decades of research, teaching, and thought leadership at the intersection of economics, financial markets, and institutional reform. I am so excited for today's conversation. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, excited to be on the program.
Yeah, I mean, we were having a just a great conversation to even start. And I feel like we were talking about identity, talking about what it's been like to immigrate to this country and just our own unique experiences with it. I would love to just know a little bit more about your backstory before we get into how it's impacted your studies, your research, all the things that you've done since. But you said you grew up in India and you traveled all around with your family. What was that experience like? I feel like oftentimes people who do grow up in India usually stay in one state or one area. So the unique opportunity to kind of see more of it is always, I think, a fascinating experience. What was that like?
It was actually after the fact, and even while it was happening, I actually enjoyed it because got an opportunity to just see different places. It was challenging because India is very unique in the sense that every state has its own distinct language and culture and food and all that. But I thought it was fun. And when you are younger, you kind of are like a sponge. So I think, and my own parents are from two distinct communities and different mother tongues and so on. So it wasn't that unique to me because it was already in the family. And so I would say overall, it was probably defined who I am much better, much more than I thought. I was used to differences rather than homogeneity. So it made me feel uh, like I was different, but not in a bad way. You know what I mean? It didn't leave me feeling that I was different or I didn't understand the culture. In fact, quite the opposite. That I was very adaptable and very open and to change. And then I went to boarding school and I went to college. I did one PhD at Indian Institute of Management, and then I moved to the US. India did affect me strongly because when I was growing up, the presence of the government and the public sphere was huge. That led to both huge benefits, but also this feeling that uh, society, or particularly public policy, was uh, probably not extreme, but a bit much. And coming to the US was refreshing from that perspective because it was also a place where you could do whatever you want and society didn't judge you that much. So that was very key to my growth to experience both. But now I'm kind of at a space, I think, as we were talking, I really don't belong anywhere. You know, so that ties into my childhood experience too. And I find that good. Why? Because I love both places, but I'm also able to distance myself from both and probably think in a more balanced way about things, right? Because every physical place comes with what we call culture, and so and it is informed how I have professionally grown. And one last comment about that is the US certainly is a place, especially academia, which is so unique that it allows you the freedom to be who you want to be, as long as you do the necessary work required to achieve that freedom. It's getting tenure and being in a. So that has given me the freedom to express myself much more than a traditional job would have. So I wanted to highlight that because otherwise it becomes an experience that's not very well informed. So, for example, if I work in non academic jobs in both countries, probably experience would be similar. Whereas academia in the US is very, very unique to the world, even to academic institutions in the Western world and rest of the world. It's very, very different.
Mm.
So
I mean, I was going to ask you that next because I think it's hard to speak on academia itself is this very lofty. It's hard to really pinpoint to speak for academia for an entire country. But I'm still very curious to hear, at least from your experiences, what the differences you feel fundamentally are between the way academia exists in India versus how academia exists here.
if we have this conversation, I'll contradict myself. I do that all the time because that's who I am. But it's not actually contradiction, it's just I'm speaking my mind. So I think the before I start, I say things even in the US and academia have changed quite a bit over the last few decades. So when I speak of academia, I first want to speak of academia as in when I started, because I think that's a fair place. And that informed my experience a lot because there was nothing like that in India. I had been to one of the top institutions in India and I had done a PhD already, but it was in the US where you realized what doing research meant. Uh, it was genuinely addressing issues from scratch that you are interested in, and hopefully other people are too. I think that's very, very unique to the US at that time. Whereas in India, it was the good thing was you were always informed by public policy, but the constraint was that you didn't think freely enough. You always started thinking within the confines of what was around you. And in the US, I felt like I could do anything I wanted that interested me and deep, dig real deep with the very important caveat that it may not work. So for 4 years, I was working on a thesis. People may not have liked it. So in India, it was better in the sense that it was safer because you, to begin with, chose something that was defined more by the environment. You see what I'm saying? So you were not on
Mm,
your own. But that also was, in some senses, the downside. It's changed a lot in India. And other countries have become more research oriented, more independent thinking. And I would say that difference was very important. And the the issue is that you have to spend years. It's not just after your PhD, then you have to spend 6, 7 years kind of getting tenure, and it's all extremely competitive. But underlying is you do what you want to do, and let's see if it works out, kind of thing. I like that very much. I like not knowing what's going to happen more than I like knowing what's going to happen. You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
So
100%.
that fed into who I was, and fortunately, I then felt like I had achieved something, and very quickly, I then my interest went all over the place. And this is where my past came into mind. I kind of started questioning the system a little bit, and that's where you see my career went more towards socially oriented, but research based work. And I love finance. So I never thought I would find it. I just found it by mistake, kind of. I was figuring out what to do. And finance beauty is it's a framework that's applicable to just any problem. Any problem. Turns out that it's used largely in the corporate world, but It's a way of thinking that could benefit any problem you face,
Mm,
and especially complicated problems, because it is grounded in such a deep framework that you can apply it wherever you want. And one last comment, which is judgmental, but I'll say this: it's unfortunate it's not used more.
mm,
So you see what I'm saying? It lends itself to so much more application, especially to areas of sustainability, impact investing, name it. But it has become, I wouldn't say completely, but identified more with private investment, stock markets, bond markets, which I love. I mean, that's where my research is. But point I'm making is it's much richer than standard applications or what you read in the press too. That's in my
mm.
book, unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, I think this one of the things that I'm really fascinated by, particularly in education, is this idea that no matter what you study, no matter what you've been through or experienced, it provides a certain framework that helps you understand the world. And I think one thing that's really unfortunate is, for example, I had a physical disability growing up, and I guess still, but I think oftentimes I was taught to think about it as something that required pity. Like, ah, this is so sad, you have this, blah, blah, blah. But as I've gotten older, one thing that I've really understood is the unique perspective that it's given me. Having to navigate a body that looks different has given me a certain understanding of a society's relationship with their bodies, for example. How does it kind
Mm.
of embed itself into your insecurities to make you feel something so that they can manipulate you to extract value from you? And but these are things that I feel like I felt even more strongly because of a particular condition that I had. And I think that's the same way with everything that you study. When people ask, what's the point? Rather than only thinking about these frameworks as like a what can I do with it, it also shapes the way you understand everything. And so as a background with my background in mathematics and data science, I strongly feel that data science gives a very it gives a particular form of understanding of the world, the way you break down a problem, the way you think about it, the way you think about solutions, all of it is kind of shaped by that. So I'm really curious to get a little bit more into this finance framework that you talk about to really understand what is that? What how do you differentiate that particular framework from maybe an economist or a doctor or an engineer?
So I think I'm an economist who then did finance. And that distinction is very important because it's actually finance won't exist without economics. So the mother discipline of finance is economics and at a foundational thinking level. I'm not talking about uh, I'm not talking about tactics, how tactically it's embedded in economics, because economics is too broad, too rich to define in a particular way, particularly history. So, just to give you a quick back, economics was much more philosophy than it was tactical or whatever. It was a way of thinking.
Hmm.
And over the years, especially in the last 100 years, two things have happened. And I'm generalizing even at the risk of misrepresentation because it needs to be said. I think it's closer to the truth than it is uh, that economics worldwide, more so in the West, has become more about mm, technology in and mathematics influencing it in a tactical executionary way rather than the philosophical grounding of it. So that's a broad statement, but let me tell you why I like finance. I love philosophy, I love economics, but I also like to see things happen and to try to affect the real world or to understand the real world. And I think finance is a very good marriage between economics and reality. It's the closest part, it's closest part of economics to reality. So economics is a way of thinking, but many often you don't know what to do next after you've thought about something, practically speaking. Whereas finance is very applicable. And what I found really awesome about it is I didn't have to search for a real world example to motivate it in the classroom. It was out there. Take any example. In fact, as I said earlier, it's unfortunate all our examples come from the corporate world. You can easily pick a social problem and take the economics framework or financial framework. So it's very grounded. And
Mm.
the grounding happened in the 50s and 60s and 70s, basically trying to understand how time affects decision making. And second, the second component is how risk enters the equation because you essentially don't know the future. So to me, it's the most powerful thinking about decision making. There's no second. I mean, we can talk about a lot of statistics and so on. Nothing to go against it, but finance borrows all those different disciplines and makes it its own. So my favorite quote is if you're an engineer or a data scientist, like you talk about problem solving and all, finance has it, but there are no answers in finance. so so it's beautiful because it uses frameworks, but it deals with a phenomena that's very not quite susceptible to frameworks. Human behavior. Human behavior you can't easily put in a box and try to say, you know, X, Y, and Z. So to give you another flavor, I won't call it a science. And in fact, I feel science is used all over the place and has lost its meaning. It's a scientific way of looking at the world, but the phenomena itself is not scientific. By that I mean it's not like physics or something like that, where things do add up and work in a certain way, both conceptually and in reality. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Whereas in economics, you can take or finance, you take a framework to it, but the thing you are studying is not determined, not true, is never true. Any
Mm.
decision you make today will be wrong in the future because you don't know what's going to happen. But the beauty of it is it keeps you disciplined. It keeps you thinking in a very focused way. And the world is very complicated. It helps you put structure on the world and think of it in a very smart, identifiable, and refutable way. You see what I'm saying? The
Yeah.
beauty of hypothesis is if they can't be rejected, they are not a good hypothesis. They're not very
Yeah.
scientifically based.
So one question I have is I took this really interesting in policy school. I took this interesting econ class, and I feel like I got a foray kind of into what that space looks like, where a lot of it was talking about the distribution of resources, which is where I think a lot of the philosophy came out. What
Yeah.
is the ideal society we imagine for the future, and what does the distribution of scarce resources look like there? I don't fully. I've never taken a finance class, so I'm a little short-sighted on that kind of whole world. And
Yeah.
so, what
Yeah.
would finance necessarily entail?
Finance is too broad to put in a picture, but I'll give you my take on finances. So economics is a discipline which basically is a study of scarcity. We have unlimited wants, and that definition of economics is very rare. Our wants are unlimited, but our resources are limited. So, how do you allocate resources to different things? And free markets, uh, we are jumping a little bit all over the place, but that's fine. Free markets' beauty is that it'll give you prices so that you can devote resources to different things. You see what I'm saying? There's demand and
Hmm.
supply. So if it's relatively unconstrained, free markets are supposed to give you the signal of where to devote resources. most of recent in economics, especially in the West, and finance has been on that issue. How are prices determined? Because they will be used to allocate resources. It's as simple as that. The difference between economics and finance is the study of time. So it is, how do you make decisions that affect the future? And that to me is critical distinction between economics, the foundational field, and the application of finance to it. And when you bring markets into the picture, finance flourish because if you have markets that are competitive, like the stock market and bond market or foreign exchange markets, they are so competitive that they come closest to the reality of providing prices that actually can be used to make decisions. So that's the distinction. The downside, of course, is that competitive markets are framed in an environment where you believe prices reveal everything about scarcity. The reason I went into impact and sustainability is that can't be true because markets don't exist for many important things. Like there's no market for figuring out pollution. Markets are very asymmetric. They exist for things that we want, goods. They don't exist for bad. There's no market for pollution unless you create it through public policy. On the other hand, if every enterprise is looking out for itself in a free market system, it is incentivized not to care about its effect on society. You understand what I'm saying? So, when I say public policy or the finance is not used enough in the world, it's used focused on the engine of creating value through private enterprise for the most part. It's not focused on the consequences of each, our collective effect on the society, environment, and so on. And to me, that's a
Mm.
huge problem. And it's not the
So
finance's problem, it's our application. It's more complicated, but the thinking has to be the same. You have to think about your impact on the rest of society. Otherwise, it's not very interesting.
yeah, I
Uh,
mean, this conversation has come up a lot. So I grew up in the Bay, so I feel like being in that tech bubble. I even seen. I mean, that quote I think is it goes something along the things of like move fast and break things, right? I mean, the that fundamental theory I think is something that we see all around. And so going into DC, I feel like I took the kind of tech world thinking with me. And the first thing I remember, I would have these conversations with so many of my peers there, especially social media would come up a lot. And I would always at that point say, I think it's on the responsibility of the user to figure out whether if they want to use it or not. And if they feel like these companies are taking advantage of them, they always have the choice to not use it. At that point, I wasn't on any of the social media, so I felt in some ways like it's the user's responsibility. The company's goal is going to be to extract as much value from you as possible, and if there's harm caused in that, it should be the user's responsibility. But spending time in policy, I feel like I fell somewhere more in the middle, understanding, okay, but there is also so much exploitation happening. You have to you can't just say it's on the people's fault. I think one thing that I'm curious about in the things that you're saying, which is thinking about what the impact of what you're going to do is. I'm curious if you took Facebook, for example, which was started as something where the vision was never to be this thing where billions of users are on it, where you're influencing elections. And when it started, I don't think that could have even been conceptualized that it would have that much power. So, how is it you might make something without having any intention knowing what it will become? So, how do you make a decision then without that kind of foresight?
yeah, I think so I have very strong views on things like this. So, and they're not meant to be judgmental or not. I think we all humans, I agree with you, when most of the time, and I run three funds, we invest in startups. And we invest in startups that are concerned about these issues, broader issues. Because the first statement I'll make, and if somebody disagrees with this statement, I think it's because of the problem that we don't think deep enough when we start something. So a statement I'll make is that it's almost mathematically the case that every entity will create more societal harm than it thinks it will. By that, I don't mean deliberate harm. I mean the kind that you, by that, I mean any company, take AI. I'm really fascinated. I work a lot with AI modeling and so on, and it's very, very powerful. However, nobody would have thought, including me, the impact on the environment based on the electricity it uses, you know? So from a sustainability standpoint, even I get caught up in the fact that it's so powerful now that I don't even think about its impact. So I'm with you when you say that nobody probably deliberately wants to create even minimal harm to society in any which way. And Facebook probably didn't either. I wasn't there. And in my experience with foundational startup people, they are really passionate. And because we pick societal effects, startups who are trying to solve a societal problem in healthcare, education, climate, it comes with them. They partly are doing it because of that. However, I think the longest time didn't quite understand the dynamic negative effects that could possibly have in the future. We just couldn't comprehend. But now I think we can, especially in climate. We have enough data to figure out what harm would be causing from day one. By harm, I mean potentially negative effects on the environment. In social sphere, it's much more complicated, Gautam, because I don't think when Facebook was started, people even knew this animal. It's like when Amazon was started, nobody had any idea
Yeah,
of
they're
what
just
the
selling
heck it
books.
was, right? And
Yeah,
Amazon is much more measurable. It sells goods and services at cheaper cost. That's all it does. Barring some branches, it does, like in AWS, and nobody thought about the cloud so deeply. So my point here is everybody, maybe 30, 40 years ago, at least in the environmental space, and now even in the social space, probably didn't think about the negative effects because it was very tough to figure out what they could possibly be, right? So your example is a great one. I don't think anybody had any clue what technology would do, leave alone what Facebook would do. But now, if you approach all startups looking at only the positive effect that they can capture through money, is foundationally wrong thinking. It cannot be the case. You may not be able to do much about it, but to start thinking about the negative effects, it's almost as important as it is to think about the selling of the product effect. You see what I'm saying? And here I
mm,
will say my major worry is that the last many decades, education, especially at top business schools, including ours, has focused largely on the monetary capturing effects of enterprises. And the negative effects foundationally cannot be captured monetarily till the government or public policy makes a market for it, like carbon trading or something like that. You see what I'm
yeah,
saying? So there's an
yeah, yeah.
asymmetry. And it's not a free ride. Life cannot be a free ride. It's just a fact. So focusing only on the positive now and not on the negative, even conceptually, I think is flawed.
Yeah.
It's
But
foundationally flawed.
I feel this way strongly with education itself. I mean, I wonder if there's a lot of ties between those two. In the same way, someone thinks about the philosophy behind why someone wants to start a business, I think oftentimes can be also synonymous in the ways of why someone wants to be more educated, why someone wants to go to school. And I think in the same way, I think one of the biggest downfalls of American education will be the fact that it's been completely co-opted by the desire to simply just make more money. And so whatever comes and replaces that and allows you to make more money in your process, that will take on the role of schooling, and that will be it. Where I feel like traditionally a lot of these universities represented something more, something more of an education rather than simply just a training. But in this same context of why people start businesses, I mean, I'm actually staying with a friend who's worked in a lot of different startups, and the way he even thinks about why he wants to, work for these companies, it's always just been how can I make as much money as possible, and any downstream impact of that can just be pushed on to anybody else who comes down the road, and it's not I made the money, but I don't really mind. And so it seems that, however, like you said, does cannot be monetarily evaluated. So how is it that you can kind of combine these two? Because everyone has a different value system. Everyone kind of thinks about these two differently. Where when you think about money, it's something a little bit more solid. But like whether something is a morally right or that seems to differ so much from situation to situation, country to country. And so how is it that you can associate thinking beyond money when it comes to finance or business?
You're asking really important questions, Gautam, and I I don't think you can unless it's around you. You have to be very unique to be born suddenly in a world which only thinks about, say, my personal benefit. And this is where, much as I didn't like it, it has to be the case that I must have seen something different growing up. It can't be that I'm unique. Nobody's unique. I mean, everybody's unique, but nobody's unique. So it has to be the case that somehow I saw it somewhere, and I think it was growing up. I most of what I saw was thinking about society. It was not perfect. It wasn't. I mean, politicians have their own incentives and so on, but society was almost the first thing that struck you before you thought about yourself. So what I'm concerned about is not so much that some specific individual thinks like that. What I'm concerned is if a lot of, as you say, a lot of us think like that, all of us, it has to be the case that the collective has lost. It can't be the individual. I don't think any individual is responsible for societal thinking. It's all of us together. And what we have done is, I'll give you an example which is not as perhaps as dramatic as climate change or poverty, which is real, inequality in the US, which is astonishing. Um, let's stay away from those for a second. I'm not saying those are not important, but just think about how we educate. And here I'll make some controversial statements. Without specialization, I don't think we could have achieved a lot of quote unquote progress. I understand that. But I think the downside is we don't educate, we train. So from the day one of a university, the thing is, what do I need to know about one small thing in depth? You will never have a public lens. If you are educated, you're trained, you're not educated. To me, the big difference, especially in professional schools, we know how to do something, but we have no clue why we are doing something. So the question of why is never asked.
Yeah.
It is how. Tell me how to do something. So it's good to know how to do something, but I think why go to school if you want to learn how to know something? Just work. That's the best way to learn how to do something. You see what I'm saying? So I think
100%.
higher education has failed us badly by, without intention, focusing on the how of things, not the why of things. And that's why we are now in, especially business schools and engineering schools, are now at a very difficult spot where education may better be provided at work. Because
Yeah.
if you see what I'm saying, if you're focused
Yeah.
on how of things, work is the best place to learn them. It's a costly place, but so is education. You give up so much money and resources. So, to your point, even if you don't go deep into societal issues of which, by the way, Gautam, you don't have to look too far to see how the world is operating right now, everywhere. It's not doing well. We are not living in a place where love, caring is the norm. And it's coming from such a micro set of issues where education is focused on the now and how. It's not deep, there's no philosophy. Finance has no philosophy anymore as it's applied, which I think is sad because it's a study of time. How could you just application without understanding? You see what I'm saying? So what I love about AI is it's providing you the tool, but here's the problem: we are set up. AI, I mean the following: it is much faster in solving an iterative problem that's well defined that a human can be. But we are training humans for last 40, 50 years to be like a robot. You see what I'm saying? I know
Yeah,
this
yeah.
very narrow field. So this is a very deep conversation because it has two impacts. One, it makes the human machine-like, regardless of the. I believe the beauty of humans is to think deeply before you act. And I'm talking about the halves of society behaving like that. There are so many of us that don't have the opportunity to even go to school. You know what I mean? You have traveled.
Yeah, yeah.
In the US, abroad, every. If the haves, we start training ourselves narrowly without thinking of society, what do you do? What, you know what I mean? This is, I don't want to get too worked up about it, but this is a very serious issue.
No, I I get worked up about it often. I mean, I mean it's and I guess the way you I mean the thing is I don't know. I think it was interesting. We had a conversation a couple episodes ago about science and scientific thinking. And it's fascinating how this type of thinking has also embedded itself in science, where how many published, what school do you teach at, or what school are you a professor at? How many papers have you published? You've made that a market too. And now everyone just chases that for some sort of high level employment. So, and the thing is, when you have this conversation, I think what often comes up is, well, raising children is expensive. Owning a home is expensive. I have to think about money, otherwise I won't be able to sustain myself. And so the only option I'm left with is to only think about how much money can I make? How do I maximize for profit? And all the other considerations are way under. And anyone who does take those other things into consideration, I think can often easily be shot down as, oh, you just have the time and resources to think about that. The rest of the people don't. And so you don't get to act like that's a good way to think about things because other people just don't have the time and resources. If everyone thinks like this, it just feels like we're just going to keep exploiting each other, and the few people that choose not to are just going to be labeled off as like, oh, those are just. But it's fascinating because I've spent a lot of time, I was teaching in the Himalayas, for example. The people there did not think very exploitatively. They were not thinking about how can I extract as much resources from others, and they didn't have much either. And so there are a lot of examples of communities out there who don't think about problems in a very exploitative manner, where I think, okay, there's an issue that arises. People need help on this. The first question isn't how can I now make a lot of money doing this? The question is how do I solve the problem and sustain it so that it can be continuously solved rather than how do I now profit from the fact that people are having this problem?
Yeah, I think, Gautam, I agree with you. I, in fact, think that if what you're saying is true, that most of us think about money and so on to then act on anything, then there's no end to it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And the data seems to support that. I'll tell you why. Because it seems like we are happy with any amount of inequality in the world. It doesn't seem to bother us anymore. At the same time, probably the poorest people in the world our resources, but don't seem to be unhappy about it, right? I'm not talking about real misery and war and stuff like that. So the catch 22 here is a deeper issue, and this is a tough issue, Gautam, to the extent that we believe that every human being has rights. This is a very tough conversation. Has individual rights of freedom to do whatever they want. And with 8 billion people plus on the planet, some of us will choose to only make money. And even if a decent fraction chooses to do that, there's going to be some sort of calamity. I don't want to go back to Malthusian economics, which said that things would just explode, people would die to stabilize things and so on. But this is not sustainable. If people can't even survive day to day in parts of the world and others are just making money all the time, it's not sustainable. Something will give. The, that's almost mathematically going to happen. The sad part that I worry about is that the argument that I have to make money to make live properly and feed my children, you don't need to make that much. Yet we are seeing 10% not even happy with that. So the definition of what is enough is not obvious anymore. Do you see what I'm saying?
No,
And that's a
100%.
very cultural thing. So one of the things globalization has done is wonderful. We get to meet people from all over the world. We get to travel, some of us. But the downside is that many of us are thinking of the globe as a place to live in and travel and freely do things with seemingly unrelated resources. But the tragedy is in each country, that level of inequality is actually probably going up because the few are controlling. I'm worried
Mm,
about what the few who have control are doing because the people without resources don't have any say in the matter. Having an election every 4 years is really not, in my book, a democratic way of engaging with the world. Do you see what I'm saying? So
mm.
money has money controls. And the sad part is it doesn't seem like enough money is, there's no concept of enough money anymore. I'm not
So,
offering solutions. I'm just saying in a climate like this, where if everybody thinks the only way to progress is to make money, the outcome has to be a little bit scary, right? Because
I mean,
we are
no, I mean,
looking out for ourselves, then that's not sustainable.
I mean, it's so clear to me. And I think something I'm curious about is, and I think this is where I wish when I get stuck at this point is where I wish I had a stronger understanding in economics, because the first question then is why do we even have business? What is a business? Why is it that we even have them? And because honestly, I was spending some time in New York and a friend was explaining stocks to me. And I tried, but it was just way over my head, the kind of way that they evaluate what it's going to. The question that I had is what would be the worst thing if a company was making enough money to pay all of their employees and provide for themselves, and they just continuously sold products to be able to do that? And they it just didn't make sense to me why you had to keep infinitely growing. That part was just confusing to me. But I know there's a whole science in behind it, and I just don't know. But I guess maybe the first thing we can start with is how did businesses even, I don't know if maybe this is out of the purview of this conversation, but how did businesses even start? What is the origination of a business?
Oh, businesses have been there since we probably were in the cave. And businesses are a way of creating something somebody needs and providing it to them. Uh, the fundamental change where finance, I would enter the picture and came with reality is that any one person doesn't have all the resources they need to do anything, right? Are you with me? So What finance's beauty is that if you can demonstrate, this is what I meant, both science and art. What I love is if a business, somebody comes to your door and says, look, I have this wonderful idea of satisfying this obvious demand for X, and that X, don't associate money with the X, just associate some need. Could be food, could be education, could be anything. But I don't have the resources to do this. I need, say, $1 million to start this business. I don't have the million. Here's where finance and stock market comes in. The person puts in some of their own resources and then knocks on your door, my door, and so on, saying, could you give some resources? And we like the idea. Literally, that's how it happens. And we say, okay, take our resources. And there are contractual ways of defining that arrangement. But stocks to me is the most beautiful one because you give the money and there's no contract. You give the money in the hope of getting money back. When will you be paid back for giving your friend the money? Is when you make money, right? You can't, you have to pay off your employees, everything. And after that, you're left with $5. You give some of it to me because I gave you the money, and some of it to others because they gave you the money. That's called dividend. That's what finance does. Finance makes folks start things for which they don't have the money right now, but from taking it from others. That's what a stock market is.
Mm.
The beauty of the stock market is then there was an exchange created where you could trade these things with each other. You know, you had something which promised you, didn't promise you, but you had an expectation of getting dividends in the future. You gave it to somebody else because you wanted money in return right now. You wanted to sell it. So think of it as a way of transferring resources over time. And a marketplace is awesome because it allows you to do that. If you believe progress is good, with the stock market, we were able to progress much faster than with the
Mm.
limited resources each person had. Do you see what
Quick
I'm saying?
question. I have a
Yeah.
quick question. So, what is the, thank you for explaining that. What is the difference between, for example, just taking a loan versus having a stock? So, let's say I just give you money and you pay me with an interest and you eventually pay it back. Why?
One small difference, but important one. I have a contract with you. In a loan, it's on a piece of paper. And banks typically do that, give loans. They say, I'm giving you $100 today. Give me $2 for every 6 months or every year for 5 years, and then give me the money back. It's a contract. The beauty of stocks is I call it love and fresh air. There's no such contract. You have a piece of paper, but if the company is unable to pay you, that's it. You can't do anything. So if you have a loan, you can go after the company. If you have stock, you can do nothing. But the good news is if the company makes money, the loan makes only that $2 you promised. Whereas stock market goes up, you get more. So that's the beauty of it. It's a pretty awesome thing created. But it's not, it's used only for things like selling toothpaste and stuff. So the problem is not finance, it's what we want to create. We want to create commodities. Even education has become a commodity. So we want to finance commodities, which is sad. You want to finance real powerful things. So I love technology. It helps in the future, but technology also has negative effects. It creates demand for electricity, which creates pollution. There's no natural way of selling stocks for pollution. Who's going to buy some stock for a negative thing? Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
the government has to step in and create a market for that, if at all, or impose taxes,
So,
penalize companies, right?
yeah,
So I think like everything else, have you seen Lord of the Rings?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So the ring is very powerful, but it's very negative too. So most things in life, and I'm serious about it, Gautam, except love, comes with a dark side. And the dark side of markets is not because of markets, because of humans, is that we don't want to pay for the costs we create for others.
Mm.
We'll have to pay for the market cost because you can't just say, give me your product. I want to produce something from it, but I'm not going to pay you anything. That's not going to work. But what you can do is pollute the environment and nobody cares till it becomes so bad that the world starts saying climate. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a huge asymmetry in human behavior. We like to capture the good we create, but we don't want to pay the cost. I don't think this is a particularly novel idea, but it's true of human behavior, and it's now become pretty obvious. So much so that we don't mind polluting another country if it benefits us, whichever the country may be.
So one question I have for you is in talking about these incentive structures, if let's say for example I need to constantly make my shareholders happy, so every month every quarter I have to make more money, and so how they are happy is if only if I make more money, and so does that not make it's the incentives are there itself where that's going to be the only thing I'm thinking about? There's no like, oh, if I become a little bit more clean for the environment then the shareholders will be happy, like they don't really care.
Yeah. So the system is set up where you think of, so this is, I think, changed over the last 50 years. The government, the people responsible for the collective, used to have a framework where you first, or at least thought as much about the public effect of your endeavor. Competition is important. Why go to the environment? Competitive markets are good because they benefit the consumer. We have become monopolistic. So the so the deeper issue is this, Gautam. Where do you start? Do you start thinking that we are part of a globe, and the globe is because of which exist, or we exist only to satisfy my own need tomorrow? We have gone from the we are here because of the globe to we are here. The globe is here for us. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the dramatic thinking. In India, when I grew up, it was all about the environment, the globe, the public policy. You couldn't literally start a business without answering those questions. The downside is there are few people controlling everybody else. You see what I'm saying? Few people in
Hmm.
government, there was a little bit corruption, so catch 22. But in terms of framework, people thought at least as much about society when they were starting their company as they would, because there were taxes, there were things to worry about, there was structure. You couldn't just simply do whatever you wanted. Now it's the opposite. You think of yourself first because nobody is paying attention to the rest of the society, including the government. Do you see what the problem is? The problem is
I
not
mean,
an
yeah.
easy one. Each one of us wants to maximize our own happiness. Forget money. Money is just the wrong thing to focus on. Each one wants ourselves to be happy. But 8 billion people seemingly can't be happy without creating some unhappiness in the process to other people. This is
Mhm.
almost factually true. Forget money. I mean, money is just put it aside. There is conflict. There is conflict of interest. There has to be a way of resolving it. In the business space, there's no now way of resolving it. I mean, it's free for all. So without institutional structures that help you, force you to think about society, humans will do what we are doing. You understand? Money or no money. Money is just a facilitator. It's not as if money has a life of its own. It's just a
Mm.
facilitator. It's very liquid. You can, if more you have, more power you have. You can buy the government officials too. So you see what I'm saying? So, but the inherent problem that individual will only look out for themselves will always be there. Some of us do worry about others, but I think that has somehow to be part of societal thinking. So my only suggestion is don't think about only money as the problem, because that's, I think, missing the point in my book. What we have is where we are looking out for each other. It's a very tough problem. We want individual freedom. We want individual action. We don't want other people to bother us. It would be great if our actions didn't create cost for others. You see what I'm saying? If in my
Yeah.
seeking happiness, I didn't make you unhappy unintentionally, then things would be fine if there were unlimited resources. One last comment. What I don't like about economics or economists is we are hypocritical. We never try to price things that are free and are crucial to life, like fresh air. We never think of it. We think nature will give us with abundance while we exploit it. I think that's a very unfair, myopic view that we can
Mm.
keep destroying Earth and it'll keep giving back. You understand what I'm saying?
No, 100 definitely, yeah.
So we have stepped back from that. Everything we do affects society, almost everything we do.
Yeah.
And to not think of that, and I blame higher education more than anybody else, Gautam. I don't blame businesses for it. I don't. I blame education where you don't even think about these things. How are you supposed to, at 35, suddenly start saying, you know what, I care more about others than I care about myself? Not that that was the goal. This is not a money problem. This is not a finance problem.
Yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying now because those are all just tools.
Yep.
Money is a technology that allows for certain things to happen. That in it inherently in itself cannot be the problem.
And here's the thing. Think about any value creation these days, Gautam. It's very rare. It's a new product. Very
Hmm.
rare. Despite the hype, it is some combination of the past. Are you with me? Put together in a new way.
Hmm.
That's all it is. And we are into commoditizing the heck out of everything. We are trying to, and that's because we want it available and for sale to everybody, and everybody has a need for it. What that does is it makes you focus on one small thing that you know what I mean? And here's the beauty of money. Money is the most liquid tool you could have, i.e., I can transfer it to you like this.
Hmm.
So if I wanted to actually buy you as a politician, if I wanted to influence you as a politician, but I didn't have money, what would I have to do? Show up on your door every day, talk to you every day. Very painful for both of us. But if I have money and I know you want it, I just write a check. That's the beauty of money. It makes things very easy, including,
Hmm.
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I find that to appear in so many different ways. I think another one is we watched this really beautiful Iranian movie a couple days ago called The Wind Will Come. The wind will guide us, I think. Beautiful movie. And one of the things that it talked a lot about was just this idea of people doing things for each other. It covered this journalist going through a small Kurdish village. And something that happened so often there was the person who made milk would just give milk to the neighbor, and the person who had chickens would just give eggs. There was kind of this just community. People cared about each other, and this guy from Tehran comes and giving he's paying everybody. And it's interesting because when you pay someone, you no longer need to feel the real gratitude or appreciation for the person. Because in your mind, you're like, all right, transaction, I gave a little bit, they gave me a little bit. I don't even need to be appreciative for them, which actually ends up cutting off a really key aspect of human connection, which is there are going to be times when I'm in need. And the people who are around me and love me will do that for me. And then simultaneously, there's going to be times that I'm going to have to show up. But if there's something always being transacted like money, you never have to experience that and you never have to give that for someone else. Because only if someone pays you, you have to give something and you don't ever have to really. So I think it's fascinating. I'm noticing this even in my life, how much my relationship with this form of transaction has changed a lot of relationships as well.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we are getting into territory which is really, really important, but sadly, even at the look, life is much more complicated than words can express. You know, thinking is much more complicated. At times, I feel reading, writing, and the 3 hours or 4 hours in education are misplaced. Thinking is what comes first. I could be wrong about it, but to me, if you don't know how to think deeply, it's a problem. So, speaking of transaction, everything, including when education becomes transactional, the time where you go to reflect, take time off from the real world, and think becomes transactional, story is over.
Yeah.
If family becomes transaction, story is over. So I have a problem with, I agree, ethics and thinking society is very important, but I think business school, it's too late. If you have to teach ethics and thinking about society, which we do need, I think it's a commentary on society, not on business schools. I think business schools should be assuming that those skills are already with you. And
Hmm.
so I would say that we have pretty much outsourced everything, including our health, bringing up our children. Everything is becoming transactional. And
It's
maybe
so
that's the,
sad. It's so sad. You can't do anything in this entire planet without paying someone for it. Like,
yeah.
there's a few parks you can go to. There's a few things you can do still. Like, one of my favorite, sorry, I feel so, one of my favorite things about the United States is the amount of national forests that you can camp
Yeah,
in and
yeah,
spend time
yeah.
in for free. And the museums in DC. I mean, it, the number of things are very limited now, I think. Yeah,
No,
it's sad.
I would say, yeah, uh, you're absolutely right. But another thing we don't think about is, which is a problem that is almost unsolvable, is simply because of the number of people in the world, you are going to have scarcity simply because of the number of people. Therefore, we have to be even more thoughtful if we care about preserving nature. And even from a very homophobic way, I mean, thinking only of humans, you want these to be available for future humans, right? If you enjoy them. And I agree with you, they're becoming scarcer and scarcer simply because of the number of people increasing, but also less emphasis on protecting them. I think almost any human would enjoy nature. I don't think I've met anybody who says, you know what, I don't like sitting next to the river. I would rather be listening to machinery all day long. You see what I'm saying? So, no, I agree with you. It's becoming, I think Einstein said it, though he has been quite kind of given credit for almost anything deep in life other than Buddha and, Martin Luther and other obvious cases. Uh, he basically said you can only value things that are not valuable.
Hmm.
You can only, that's the tragedy of market.
Hmm.
You can only price things that have no value. That's the problem, right? If you can't sell something, we think it's not valuable. And you can't sell things that are really key. You can't sell your soul. Some people do, right? Here's what we
Damn.
are really confused with is just because we can buy and sell commodities, we think we can buy and sell important things in life. That's
Hmm.
impossible. You cannot buy and sell happiness. You cannot buy and sell fresh air. You see what I'm saying? So the things that are really, really important to us cannot be commoditized. Yet we are in the seek of happiness through commoditization. You see, you see and money just facilitates commoditization. You see what I'm saying? It's very powerful. I must say, it's very powerful. It's allowed us to create so much value, but it comes with this appetite for growth, regardless of what happens to the earth, and a, in my book, misplaced belief that you can buy anything.
Hmm.
This is foundationally wrong. You just can't. If you could, I don't think anyway. We won't be humans if we could, right? You see what I'm saying?
And it seems that the world that we're building is one where people are trying to, you can now have an AI mentor, you can now have an AI girlfriend, you can now have AI, I don't know, food. Like I don't know, it seems like I guess like what I'm confused about is would it be because even the examples I gave, the first thing that came to my mind, I gave the museum and the national forest. But both of those are examples that require an insane amount of resources and money to keep running and to keep it as
Sure,
pristine and clean as they are. So they're not
sure.
just like abundantly available. They do so to ask for it to be quote unquote free would just be asking for someone else to actually be paying for it, which
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah,
also
yeah.
not fair. And
In
so
some shape or form, yes.
yeah. So they cannot be so you do need resources poured into it even if it looks to be free, but it's not actually free. And so, is it possible for? But then there's so many, I don't know, like temples, for example. There's just so many other examples where it's all done just through purely volunteer work. There's nothing really being received out of it, but just tons of people care deeply about it, and things run just out of that. I mean, open source coding. There's so much, so many. It's humans have the capacity to volunteer at such an amazing depth but they're very selective of what things they want to do and when they want to do. But right? I don't know. It's odd. Like
No,
so
it
many
is.
things. Yeah.
It is. So what here the criticism is not of any particular set of humans or whatever. It is more about we've been focused more about on markets and so on, but markets, formal markets are a very small part of life. That's what I find so amazing. I'm a finance faculty member, and I know our focus on equity markets is wrong. It's still very small part of what people do. You see what I'm saying? But it's a very powerful vehicle of extracting and transferring wealth. It does good, but it's also, to your point, I think it's great that you can get happiness out of just telling yourself you're going to be happy. I strongly believe that's possible. Except you need to be sure you're fed. The basics of life should be there. Otherwise, you're going to think about survival. It's very right. I mean, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have enough to eat, you're not going to think deep thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So I do think there is hope in the sense that we suddenly realize that the happiness we seek through money cannot is impossible. The two are contradictory because most of the time we ourselves can see we are getting happiness, even the richest of us, through things that don't require money.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely believe you can be happy without, barring, of course, it's easy for me to say because I'm not worried about my dinner tonight. You see what I'm saying?
No, no, definitely.
Yeah. So my hope is that that's our hope as humanity, that humanity doesn't need a lot to be happy.
Yeah, I wonder
But we
what
are
that
not
world looks like.
happy by being just individually happy. Data shows we want to control other people.
Hmm.
Our part of our happiness comes out of, and this I do believe is true. Given the opportunity, would love to control other people, not just through money, that's a vehicle. But I'll give you an example. A lot of nonprofits do great work, but they also are a space where there's a lot of conflict, all
Yeah.
because of wanting to capture power, time, or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we need to back off of perhaps one mantra is just focus on yourself and not try to, mess with other people. I think that's a good mantra. Very tough to. Or another way of thinking, and I don't want to get too deep, but Gautam, I think a lot about this, is that if you want to be happy in life, have empathy. And the reason is, I don't think unhappiness comes out of anything but harming other people. That's a very human thing. We get unhappy because we don't do good things to others.
Mm.
And so if you have empathy and you recognize the other person's point of view, you'll do less harm to other people.
Mm.
That's what I believe.
Yeah.
And so practicing that is tough. And if you start practicing that, we'll be fine. The more of us start caring about not every action, but are we doing things that we would like to have done to ourselves? And if the answer is yes, mostly that, I think money or no money will take care of itself.
Yeah, and I think the difficulty oftentimes, even in relation to climate, is, for example, I'm about to drive my car across the country
That's right.
to go sell it, right? And I know actively that's not good for the environment, but I don't know. I also love driving, and I
So
need
do
to
I.
and I need to drive my car across the country. And so it's like there are decisions like that where I'm like, like what am I morally wrong for making this decision? And possibly yes. But and then the second question is, do I care? And then that's the other part of the question as well. But I guess it has been interesting being like it's easy to blame corporations and not point the finger at ourselves, you know?
No, you can go farther than that. Is that it's a very tough problem. We all face it. I love AI. I think of it as a way of actually empowering people. Can you hear me?
I can still hear you, yeah.
Uh, so it's a way of empowering people, but I tend not to think of the downside, right? Because I see only the exciting parts of it. And I don't see an obvious harm I'm creating, right? But the fact is that even if, and I don't want to be negative, but I want to be almost mathematically certain about something. Even if each one of us has only one such thing we do, where there is actually some damage by driving cars or flying or whatever, there are so many of us. I think climate change is an inevitability. It's like,
Hmm.
it's, you see what I'm saying? You don't need too many favorite pet peeves or factories. It's just small interests, 8 billion of us, we are going to take us down. I mean, it's going
Yeah.
to happen,
Yeah.
right? So to pretend that you see what I'm saying? It's almost like we have reached a place where we can't help ourselves, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I believe that
I'm
very strongly. But the question is there point of delaying it, these are philosophical issues, but is it good to have more people experience the parks and so on,
yes.
other than less? And my guess is yes. I don't know the reason why I feel that way, because in a deeper sense, we are just here for a minute, anyways. So why am I so caught up in more people being on this beautiful place for a minute? You know, you see what I'm saying? We come without nothing, we come leave without nothing. So why am I so caught up in having more people have this experience?
It's an interesting question. Yeah. I mean, we talked about that 2 seasons ago because I don't think it's just so yeah. I mean, honestly, I want to say, I know time's running out, but I really want to say thank you so much for this conversation. I mean, I would love to have you back on. I just think this was uh it's fascinating how how many philosophical implications there are in every field. And
Oh yeah,
sometimes,
yeah,
and I think it's always refreshing to have them revealed so that even people in these spaces can think about these questions as well. There's no
yeah,
field
yeah,
that does it.
yeah, yeah. I wish we did more of that. Uh, in high school, if I were left alone, I wouldn't teach any skill. These are easy to
Just
pick.
talk.
Math, this, that, another are easy. I mean, they're not that complicated. What is difficult is grounding in how you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You want somehow. I think even teaching Shakespeare is better than teaching math. It
For a
shows.
while. I
Yeah,
agree. I
I
think
love
that's what
math, by
it,
the way. If there's
yeah, I
one
love
thing you
math
should
too.
know
Yeah.
is math. you know,
Yeah.
you can always pick it up. So,
Yeah.
yeah. It was fun chatting. Thanks so much.
Yeah. I want to say thank you all for listening. This was a truly a phenomenal conversation to add to this season. I hope you enjoyed. And as per usual, stay re-educated.
Bye.